Today, I am ranking all the known Dragon Ball fusions that have ever appeared in Dragon Ball. This includes the anime, manga, and even games. We'll be ranking them based on their relevance, raw power levels, popularity among fans, and just general hype. And by the end of the video, we'll present some hypothetical future fusions that might even break Dragon Ball if and when they actually happen. Number 33, starting from the worst one on our list, we've got Old Kai. It's a fusion between a young Elder Kai and an old witch, and I'd say that this is probably the only fusion in Dragon Ball history that made the characters weaker and worse off than they were before. Every other fusion leads to something better. Even failed fusions like Fat Gotenks are at least funny, but Old Kai's fusion is just sad. He lost his youth, his looks, and for what? Well, I guess he does have some magic abilities thanks to the old witch, but overall, this fusion is a straight L. Heck, I'm sure the creepy, perverted personality also comes from the witch, because no way could a Supreme Kai be that freaky. Number 32, we have something that is only a little bit better. It's Nats, the fusion between Nappa and Raditz, using the fusion dance. You could also call it a Metamoron fusion. Unfortunately, even though the two of them are Saiyans, this fusion is still fodder level. The thing is, there are objective rankings in the Dragon Ball Fusions game, and this fusion is ranked B, which is kind of sad, because even barely relevant fusions are at least an A. For example, the fusion between Chaozu and Tien of all people is given an A rank. That means Nats is objectively worse than them. I'll reference the Dragon Ball Fusions ranking of the fusion in question wherever it's relevant. We just mentioned Chaozu and Tien, so number 31, the fusion between them is called Chaohan. It's a pretty cool fusion that combines Tien's ki and martial arts with Chaozu's pure psychic powers. The character design does make Chaohan look like Krillin's evil twin brother though, but when it comes to raw physical power, it is definitely not the strongest, especially when compared with the rest of the fusions we have in our list. Next at number 30, we've got Yamcha, an EX fusion between Vegeta and Yamcha. Before I explain how strong this fusion is, let me briefly explain what EX fusions are. It's a type of fusion that is done through a method that only exists in Dragon Ball fusions. As for how the method works, the fusion requires the use of special Matamo rings made by Bulma's Capsule Corporation. They still have to perform the fusion dance, but the Matamo rings make it so people of different sizes, power levels, and attributes can also fuse properly. Alright, so back to Yamcha. While I do think that fusing Bulma's current husband with Bulma's ex is definitely something, the fusion is really lacking in terms of both aura and strength. Yamcha can use Vegeta's attacks and also transform into the Great Ape, but because the Vegeta in question is from the Vegeta saga, the fusion doesn't even have Super Saiyan, which is why it's so weak. It somehow has an A rank in the game though, but then again, Chaohan also has an A rank. Moving on to number 29, it's Tien-Cha, a fusion between Tien and Yamcha. This is not an EX fusion. It's a proper Metamoran fusion done through the traditional fusion dance and without using the Matamo rings. And it works because Yamcha and Tien are more compatible than one would think. The fusion first appears in the Budokai series, then in Dokkan Battle series, and also ultimately appears in Dragon Ball Fusions. It's honestly pretty impressive, especially because Tien-Cha can use both the Wolf Fang Fist and the Tri-Beam. Number 28, we have the EX fusion between Majin Buu and Mr. Satan, and unlike the fusion between Vegeta and Yamcha, this one is ranked S in the game. The appearance and the power comes from Majin Buu, but Mr. Satan's underhanded tactics and unspoken charisma also contribute to Majin Satan's personality. It's kind of cool, and the name is slick because both Majin and Satan roughly mean Demon King. At number 27, we have Demon King Dakalo. Demon King Dakalo is an actual, genuine fusion between two Demon Kings, King Piccolo and Dabura. It's an EX fusion that only appears in Dragon Ball Fusions, but otherwise, the concept of this fusion is awesome, and I won't be surprised if it one day appears in Dragon Ball Heroes or something similar. It's two Demon Kings in one, which means Demon King Dakala is twice as evil as either of them. He has the abilities of both King Piccolo and Dabura, but aside from the concept, this fusion is largely irrelevant even in Dragon Ball Fusions. Number 26, Goku, which is the fusion between Goku and Mr. Satan. It's a hypothetical fusion that was briefly considered by Goku during the Buu saga. It ended up debuting as a proper fusion in Budokai 2, and since then, it has appeared in many other games, including Dragon Ball Heroes. It's a Potara fusion, and although you'd expect Goku to be nothing impressive like Yamcha, this fused character is smooth. He can use Kamehameha and Spirit Bomb, but also goofy attacks like Mr. Satan's Rolling Satan Punch or Dynamite Kick. The abilities Goku can use depends on who initiates the fusion in Budokai 2. If it's Goku, he can use Kamehameha and Spirit Bomb, as well as other useful abilities. But if it's Mr. Satan, well, you'll have to survive with goofy martial arts attacks. Though there are a couple of attacks that can be used regardless who initiates the fusion. These include things like Ultra Spirit Bomb and Trick Beam. Now, this next fusion is gonna leave you stunned. It's another canon fusion like the old Kai. Number 25, we're talking about Kibito Kai, the Potara fusion between Supreme Kai Shin and Kibito. Kibito Kai is definitely stronger than either Kibito or the Supreme Kai, but he's still pretty weak and mostly a non-factor even when he is supposed to be relevant. This is why I'm placing him all the way here at number 25. This may be a canon fusion, but it's underwhelming. It doesn't even contribute to the story in any meaningful way beyond being the butt of old Kai's jokes. He does appear in most of the major Dragon Ball games though. Next at number 24, we have Krillin, a fusion between Piccolo and Krillin. There's also EX Krillin, but the one we're talking about is a Potara fusion. Naturally, Krillin is pretty smart and wise. He inherits Piccolo's battle IQ and Krillin's insane history of death and survival. Something cool about Krillin is that he shows us Kamehameha Beam Cannon, a combination of Kamehameha and Special Beam Cannon. Moving on to 23, we've got Barlot. It's Goku plus Bardock, father and son. There's not much I can say about it though. It's like Goku, but with Bardock's scar. Though, of course, Barlot can also use Bardock's abilities like Blast Cannon, which is a plus. Coming in at number 22 is Bullpan, an EX fusion between Gohan's daughter Pan and Vegeta's daughter Bulla. In the context of Dragon Ball fusions, this fusion is stated to be the ultimate female fusion, which is fair because the affinity between them must be on par with the affinity between Goten and Trunks. Bullpan can use both the Kamehameha and the Gallic Gun, in addition to their unique abilities like Maiden Burst and Maiden Blast. Plus, Bullpan is freaky. So there's also a special ability called Sexy Smile. This allows them to essentially stop an opponent from attacking by catching them off guard with sex appeal. A fantastic fusion indeed. And honestly, this is something that we need to see in Dragon Ball Super. The fusion, of course, not the sexy smile. Moving on to 21, we've got Kalohan, an EX fusion between Piccolo and Gohan. This is a crazy fusion, especially when you consider how the master and student relationship they share. This is reflected in their S-rank status in Dragon Ball fusions, but I'd argue they deserve to rank even higher than other S-rank fusions from the game, because when it comes to Kalohan, we're talking about Gohan's latent potential, Piccolo's insane battle aptitude in a singular entity. This fusion is phenomenal, and it's crazy how we're already talking about such brilliant fusions when we haven't even entered the top 20. As we enter the top 20, number 20 goes to Kuhan, a fusion between Kid Goku and Young Gohan. Of course, both Kid Goku and Young Gohan aren't as strong as their prime selves, but their affinity with each other is pretty much perfect. In fact, let me point out that Kuhan is stronger than all other EX fusions we've talked about up until this point of the video. In the context of Dragon Ball fusions, this fusion is given a G rank, which is the greatest rank possible. Though a few other fusions do share this rank, and they're also better than Kuhan. We'll be giving the next few spots in the ranking to those fusions. Then there is Celuza at number 19, final antagonist of Dragon Ball fusions. As you can guess, it's a fusion between Cell and Frieza. The selling point of this fusion is how it combines Cell's enjoyment for battle with Frieza's insane thirst for vengeance. It must also be stronger than Golden Frieza because Frieza chose to fuse with Cell even though the Golden Frieza transformation was already a thing. I'd say Celuza is a cool antagonist and also a cool fusion, but not as impressive as some of the other G-rank fusions from Dragon Ball fusions. For example, the one we have next is Karoli at number 18. It's Goku and Broly. Thanks to Goku's pure heart, this fusion is pretty stable. It is outright stated that Goku's personality is the one that has full control of this fusion. To put this fusion's power into perspective, Towa, the sister of Demon King Dabura, believed Karoli to be on par with Beerus himself. While the power scaling might be a bit debatable, this comparison isn't that much of a reach. After all, Goku himself once thought that Broly might be stronger than Beerus, so their fusion reaching that level of power isn't completely unreasonable. Even if we're talking about Z Broly rather than Super Broly, the fusion's power level being comparable to Beerus makes some sense within the context of the series, because of how absurdly exponential Saiyan fusions are. Landing at number 17 is Karoli Black, an absolutely insane fusion that combines Super Saiyan Rose Goku Black with legendary Super Saiyan Broly. But the point is that when they fuse, they appear in a form that itself is a combination of Super Saiyan Rose and legendary Super Saiyan, a divine yet primal existence. I mean, this is gonna sound pretentious, but the sheer contradiction of these two powers existing in one body makes this fusion truly ridiculous in terms of aura and hype. We need this kind of stuff in Dragon Ball Heroes. Number 16, Gomas, which is the fusion between Kid Goku and Zamasu. It's not supposed to be all that strong because it's Kid Goku, but this fusion is still given a G rank in the game because of the way the fusion puts emphasis on Goku's Saiyan potential and Zamasu's drive. According to the game's official profile, Gomas supposedly even surpasses fused Zamasu in power, though I think that claim is definitely a reach. Alright, next is Gorus at number 15, a fusion between Goku and Beerus. Although it's also G rank like the last few fusions we discussed, what makes Gorus more impressive is how it's presented as a special fusion. It can only be unlocked via QR code, and it's not even available for the English localization. It is implied to be insanely strong though, which is reasonable because we're talking about a fusion between Goku, a mortal who was able to learn Ultra Instinct, and Beerus, the strongest god of destruction. Though I'd say, in the context of EX fusions, this one is still not the strongest. Coming in at number 14, it's Whirus, the fusion between Whis and Beerus, by far the most powerful EX fusion ever created in Dragon Ball fusions. While it does share the same G rank with a handful of other fusions we've already discussed, Whirus stands alone at the top. It is explicitly stated in his profile that his fusion is the strongest. This makes perfect sense given that it involves a god of destruction and an angel. Now, you may be wondering why such an overwhelmingly powerful fusion only ranks at number 14. Well, the thing is, EX fusions are inferior to both the Potara fusions and the Metamoran fusions. Plus, they have very limited relevance because they are all exclusive to the games or collectible cards. Of course, some EX fusions can still be considered better than even some canon fusions. For example, Kibito Kai is still all the way back at number 25, but from here on out, we'll be talking about great fusions that also have many other factors going for them. Number 13 in the ranking is Super 17, a fusion between Android 17 and Hellfighter 17. Hellfighter 17 is actually another android that was created by Dr. Gero and Dr. Miu while they were in Hell. The Hellfighter 17 fuses with a brainwashed Android 17 and becomes an android mutant that's powerful enough to defeat Goten, Trunks, Gohan, Majub, and Vegeta no problem. Heck, after he starts absorbing Goku's power, he's even able to match Super Saiyan 4. Though I'd say what makes his fusion truly phenomenal is more about Super 17's ability to pump up his power level by absorbing energy attacks from his opponents, rather than the fusion itself. If we take out his ability to absorb, Super 17 is only twice as strong as 17, which is not very impressive. This fusion is from Dragon Ball GT, and it's hardcore, in the sense that it felt like the second coming of Cell games. Moving on, we have Future Gohanks at number 12, a fusion between Future Gohan and Future Trunks. Hold on, why is a fusion from Dragon Ball Fusion so high up in the ranking? Well, it's because this fusion originally debuted in Super Dragon Ball Heroes. Plus, it's not an EX fusion, it's a Metamoran fusion, which makes it more real than any EX fusion. Is it as strong as Xeno Gohanks though? For a context, Xeno Gohanks is the fusion between Xeno Gohan and Xeno Trunks, who are both from an alternate timeline. Xeno Gohanks is definitely stronger, but I'm choosing to put Future Gohanks in his stead. This fusion between Future Gohan and Future Trunks, the two tragic characters everybody already knows and loves. Though overall, while it's a part of the Super Dragon Ball Heroes storyline, it's not that relevant, so we can't justify putting it over more relevant fusions. Next up is Xeno Vegeks at number 11, a fusion between Xeno Vegeta and Xeno Trunks that is said to represent true Saiyan pride. Of course, it's not the Vegeta and Trunks from the main timeline, but this fusion holds special significance as the first successful father-son Potara fusion in Dragon Ball's history. As we all know, Goku and Gohan failed to fuse during their battle against Super Buu. This is also why I'm putting it over Future Gohanks. It gives us something fresh. Plus, who didn't want to see Vegeta and Trunks fuse, even if they're from a different timeline? And now, let's get to the top 10. At number 10, we've got the Namekian fusion between Piccolo and Kami. Now, some of you may say that this one doesn't count because Piccolo and Kami were originally a single person anyway, but even considering all that, it's still very much a legendary fusion, especially because it gave us Super Namekian. It was also a permanent one, unlike most fusions, and it further enhanced Piccolo's wisdom. Number 9, Majub, which is a fusion that somewhat parallels the Piccolo-Kami reunion in many ways. This fusion between Oob and Good Buu is special because it pretty much completes a cosmic circle. Since Oob is Kid Buu's reincarnation, this fusion makes Majin Buu whole again. Plus, when Good Buu and Evil Buu split, they didn't just divide their power, but also split the divine essence of the Grand Supreme Kai. Majub's fusion restores this divine power to its complete state as well. It's similar to Piccolo's Super Namekian because, just like Piccolo, Oob's fusion was also ultimately just about reuniting with his other half. But perhaps the single most memorable thing about Majub is his signature technique, the Chocolate Kamehameha, an energy attack that combines the raw power power of the Kamehameha with Majin Buu's iconic candy beam. It turns you into chocolate upon impact. Also, speaking of Buu, I think I'm gonna put Buuhan above Maju, and thus I have him in number 8. The fusion is between Gohan and Buu-Tanks. It happens after Gohan unlocked his ultimate state and became, by far, the strongest mortal in the universe. He was so strong that Super Buu was given the Frieza humiliation treatment. But then, Super Buu absorbed Gotenks and Piccolo, which allowed him to gain an upper hand once again. And ultimately, Super Buu succeeded in absorbing even Gohan himself. Just like that, he became the strongest mortal in the universe. It gave him the kind of aura boost that left Goku no other choice but to fuse with someone as well in order to bring out an even more powerful fusion. But let me ask you a question. Are any of these fusions perfect? Nope, that'd be Perfect Cell, which I have at number 7. This happens after Semi-Perfect Cell absorbs 18 and achieves Nirvana. He effectively becomes the strongest mortal in the universe at that point of the story, and gains the kind of power that can only be described as perfect. Sure, this may not be as strong as Buuhan or Super 17, but as far as narrative and hype goes, this was the OG antagonist fusion. You can also basically call it the ultimate bio-android fusion, because Cell is already just an amalgamation of the DNA of the most powerful fighters in the universe. Fusing with 17 and 18 was more about achieving the perfect state of body and mind. Truly, absolute cinema. Since the goal of this fusion is creating the perfect warrior, you can even argue that it's the perfect fusion. Though, as perfect as it is, we have a non-canon fusion that surpasses it in every way possible. Number 6 is Xeno Gogeta. This is definitely the greatest non-canon fusion we've ever seen. Yes, it's Xeno, which means it's about Goku and Vegeta from alternate timelines. So you may be wondering why it's so high in the list, especially considering how it's higher than many canon fusions. Well, I'd say this one gets a pass, purely for the amount of hype and aura it has given both the fans and the power scaling community. In Super Dragon Ball Heroes, when the antagonist Dark King Fu becomes the ultimate existence, with power potentially rivaling the Omni Kings themselves, things get kinda bleak. That is, until Xeno Gogeta pulls up with his super full power Saiyan 4 limit breaker state. He fights alongside the main timeline's evolved Blue Gogeta, and we're treated to the most impressive fusion duo ever seen. Though, to be fair, it's worth noting that Dark King Fu was able to defuse them with a blast of darkness, which means Xeno Gogeta isn't omnipotent. Later, during the Supreme Kai of Time saga of Dragon Ball Heroes, Xeno Gogeta gains the kind of power that allows him to break through dimensions. And after Eos, a former Supreme Kai of Time, removes the time limit from Xeno Gogeta's fusion, it effectively becomes the strongest Goku and Vegeta fusion ever. Just imagine a Gogeta that can fight without worrying about any time limit. That is crazy! But even better than that, I think it's time to start talking about the top 5 fusions of all time. Number 5 is Kefla, a fusion between Caulifla and legendary Super Saiyan Kale. It is the first female fusion to become a part of the Dragon Ball anime series, and it's also the first Saiyan Potara fusion that ever fought in the Super Saiyan 2 state. Her unique status as the only canon fusion involving a legendary Super Saiyan makes her even more special. No wonder the anime version of Tournament of Power needed a last-minute Ultra Instinct awakening from Goku in order to push her out of the ring. She was just too strong. Naturally, Kefla became a part of the major Dragon Ball games after her debut, and let me point out that in Xenoverse 2, the game straight up calls her the strongest fusion. The thing about Kefla is that we have to understand why it's so impressive, even if it's weaker than Ultra Instinct Goku. Caulifla and Kale had never seen the same kind of blood and battle as Goku and Vegeta, and yet, it's not wrong to assume that their fusion is likely stronger than Vegito from the Buu saga. Just imagine if either of them learned God Ki. How strong will Kefla be at that point? Though power scaling her does require some suspension of disbelief, because the manga version of Kefla was basically tied to Ultimate Gohan, which means that the manga version is not as impressive as the anime version. Overall, let's just say that while Kefla is well worthy of being in the top 5, the next 4 fusions are still on a different level. At number 4, we have Gotenks, the mother of all fusions. While the Namekian-style fusion and the Absorption-style fusions were already a part of the story at this point, it wasn't until Goten and Trunks fused into Gotenks that the idea of fusion was properly established. It's also the fusion where the contrast between the personalities of the duo in question is the most apparent. Trunks is kind of cocky and arrogant, but he is not too overconfident, while Goten can be immature and conceited, but he is humble. However, the mashup of their personalities results in an overconfident, dramatic, and overall a goofy entity. Gotenks is also infamous for creating bizarre attacks with goofy names. I mean, I don't remember any other characters who kept a list of techniques in their vest. Speaking of these techniques, we have Super Ghost Kamikaze Attack, where he spits out ghost versions of himself that explode on contact. Kind of cool, until you realize that these ghosts can also explode when high-fiving each other. Another one of his weird moves is the Galactic Donut, which creates a ring of energy that traps opponents. He can also combine this with the Charging Ultra Boo Boo Volleyball technique, where he uses the trapped enemy as a volleyball. This technique is from the return of Son Goku and friends. We won't go too into this insanely diverse list of techniques though, because, well, most of them are only used once or twice. And although they had ridiculous names, most of the techniques are also really simple. For example, Hyper Plasma Shortcake is basically just a kick upward despite the goofy-ass name. Ultimately, even though Gotenks hasn't had any solid W's in the canon story, the personality of this fused character was done justice, and it won't be wrong at all to call it the mother of all fusions. Another thing I'd add about Gotenks is how this fusion allows Goten and Trunks to use a transformation that they originally can't. They can't use Super Saiyan 3 individually, but fusing into Gotenks allows them to use the transformation. This is something that just doesn't happen with other fusions. At number 3, we've got the most conceptually terrifying fusion in Dragon Ball history. It's Infinite Zamasu, the end game of the fusion between Goku Black and Immortal Zamasu. It's so insane that Infinite Zamasu began overtaking the universe and also started fusing with the fabric of reality itself. He even started manifesting in other timelines. Imagine that. Imagine getting so broken and overpowered that your aura starts leaking into other timelines. That kind of aura needs to be studied. The thing about the fusion between Zamasu and Goku Black is that it combines Zamasu's immortality with Black's limitless growth, even before they evolve into Infinite Zamasu. Fused Zamasu is a near-perfect entity, even in the context of the entire multiverse. This is even more true in the manga, because unlike the anime, the manga version of Fused Zamasu is fully immortal. To elaborate on this, let me tell you that in the manga, even if you somehow blew him to smithereens, every piece of his existence will begin to regenerate by itself, just like how Boo regenerates. However, while Boo regenerates back to his proper form, every piece of Fused Zamasu can regenerate back to himself independently. This leads to a stupid number of clones that are all also just as strong as Fused Zamasu. This is what Infinite Zamasu is like in the manga, and it is by far the single greatest regeneration feat ever shown in any Dragon Ball media ever. Ultimately, the one who stops Infinite Zamasu isn't Goku or any of the Z fighters. It's the ruler of the multiverse, Zeno himself. Alright, we're down to the top 2 fusions. And of course, everybody can already tell that it's Gogeta and Vegito. But which one of them should be number 2 and which one's gonna be number 1? Well, no matter how we're gonna put it, give it a moment, because we also have a spot 0 in our list reserved for right at the end. So I'll give number 2 to Vegito, and you'll soon understand exactly why Vegito is number 2 and Gogeta is number 1. But first, let's talk about Vegito himself. This is the Potara fusion between Goku and Vegeta that leads to the most powerful character in the context of the Dragon Ball Z series. Yes, when Vegito was born in the Buu Saga, he was the most powerful character yet. This changed with the introduction of Beerus and the other universes. But Super Saiyan Blue Vegito dog-walked Fused Zamasu, and he's also considered to be an actual match for Beerus himself, which means that Vegito Blue is still in the topmost tier of all the fighters in the multiverse. So far, Vegito's strongest form is Super Saiyan Blue in the canon story, and Super Saiyan Blue Barrier in the Super Dragon Ball Heroes series. He's a cocky and somewhat non-serious entity who easily dominates every time he emerges. But it's also worth noting that Vegito has never actually finished off his opponent. In the Buu Saga, he defused after entering Buu's body, and in the Fused Zamasu Saga, he ultimately ran out of time. In terms of cool abilities, Vegito showed us Final Kamehameha and a Spirit Sword, but nothing too deep. It is said that a Potara fusion is more powerful than the Metamoran fusion dance. This naturally would mean that Gogeta is weaker than Vegito, but that may not be true. You see, there was a weekly Shonen Jump release in 1995 that stated that if Vegito were to fight Gogeta, Vegito would win if the fight was prolonged, but would lose if it's a short battle. This is the right answer to the eternal question about which of them is stronger. Vegito is more influenced by Vegeta's personality, and he can also be rather cocky and savage, while Gogeta is generally quieter and more influenced by Goku's personality. Now, Gogeta is, of course, number 1 on this list, and that's because he's just absolute peak. Let me tell you about his personality first. The thing is, he smiles after defeating his opponents. He smiled after he used Stardust Breaker attack to destroy Janemba's pure evil energy in order to turn him back into the Psyche Demon. And he also smiled when Broly teleported away, because this meant that he no longer had to kill Broly to stop him. You see, Gogeta knows that his time during each fusion is short. He knows he can only exist for half an hour. But this is also why he believes that all life is precious. He smiled because even though he defeated Janemba and Broly, he didn't have to kill them. However, in Dragon Ball Ball Heroes, there are instances where he doesn't smile. He doesn't smile after killing Hearts because he had to kill him to stop him. And this alone puts him above Vegeta because Gogeta simply has a better personality. Though, let me also add that Gogeta has a cockier and sillier personality in Dragon Ball GT. I guess that's why he wasn't able to finish off Omega Shenron. He was acting like Vegito. But anyway, speaking of finishing off opponents, let's talk about how Gogeta mostly actually gets the job done. During Fusion Reborn and then in the Broly movie, he was able to defeat his victims before running out of time. Same thing in Super Dragon Ball Heroes. He defeated Hearts and Crimson Masked Saiyan before running out of time. What I'm trying to say is that unlike Vegito, Gogeta has an actual reputation of getting things done despite having a shorter time limit. In fact, let me also point out that Gogeta is the only fused Saiyan character ever to actually defeat his opponent before the fusion ran out. He is just built different, goated through and through. Of course, Gogeta also has a higher number of transformations compared to Vegito. He can use Super Saiyan 3, Super Saiyan 4, and Perfect Super Saiyan Blue, along with Super Saiyan Blue Evolved. When you consider all this, is there any other fusion that is even half as peak as Gogeta? His portfolio is stacked with nothing but W's, and every single moment he appears on screen is pure absolute cinema. Efficient, powerful, and unforgettable. He embodies everything a fusion should be. Now, while Gogeta is indeed number one, there is one possible fusion that I'd like to include as an honorable mention. At number 0, we have Gogeta, the theoretical ultimate fusion that will combine Gogeta and Vegito themselves. Dragon Ball Heroes has already showed us that timeline crossing team-ups are possible. We've seen Xeno Gogeta fighting alongside main timeline Gogeta. This has already set a precedent that could one day lead to a situation where an alternate reality Gogeta or Vegito would fuse with the main timeline Gogeta or Vegito. But what do you think? Let us know in the comments down below. Click on this video next, where I am presenting all the insane changes that occurred between the anime and the manga in Dragon Ball. Go on, check it out!